theyeshiva.net.
So we have, good Chodesh everybody, good morning everybody, welcome. We have a Bal Bris here today, making a bris soon, Mazel Tov. Okay, so we learned that to understand Eisav, we have to understand that there's two components to Eisav. He calls here, there's the Makif of Eisav and there's the Pnimi of Eisav. The Makif of Eisav comes to his father and says, how do you give Meiser from salt and how do you give Meiser from straw? In other words, asks very holy questions. The Pnimi of Eisav, which Yitzchak knows about quite well, is Ein Shem Shamayim Shagar Befiv. When Yaakov is mentioning Hashem's name, and it's supposed to be Eisav, he knows there's something off because Eisav is not known by him to mention Shem Shamayim, Hashem's name, and therefore he's suspicious that this is not Eisav, and therefore he concludes Hakoil Kol Yaakov, V'hayadayim Yidei Eisav. The hands may be the hands of Eisav, they feel like Eisav, but the voice is the voice of Yaakov, as Rashi interprets it. What's the distinction between the Makif of Eisav and the Pnimi of Eisav? What does this mean? What does it mean? There's two aspects. This is called Makif and Pnimi. So for this, he gave the long explanation about the difference between 10 verses 11. Generally, in Kedusha, we always have structures of 10, units of 10. For example, the classic is a minyan, right? A davar shebekdusha. The Gemara says you don't say a davar shebekdusha pachas me'asara, less than 10, whether it's kriyas Torah, or Baruchu, Kedusha, or Kaddish, Amen, etc., Chazar Sashatz, or whatever the Davar Shebekdusha is. So you have the minyan of 10, the Asara is a unit of 10, which on a spiritual level represents the combination of all of the 10 koiches from Chachma through Malchus. And yet, when it comes to Zeh U'ma Zeh, the world which is not Kedusha, you would expect also 10, because everything from Kedusha, ultimately everything from non-Kedusha comes from Kedusha. So it should be reflective of each other. Kekoif b'fnei Adam, like an ape versus a man. The ape also mimics a lot of human behavior, and they're very similar to each other. Some even think that we came from apes, because they're so similar to each other. So, nonetheless, when it comes to Klippa, Kabbalah says you have things work in number 11. Like the 11 herbs of the Ktoiris, Yud Aleph Samamani HaKtoiris, which is Dafka Achad Asar Samamanim Hayova. What's the reason for this? So for this he explained that the key difference between Kedusha and Klippa is not if it has a relationship with Hashem, because everything has a relationship, because Va'ata Mechaya Es Kulam, everyone gets Chayas from him. The difference is the cognizance of the relationship, the awareness of the relationship. That in Kedusha there's there's a seamless flow from the source into the recipient. And in Klippa, the chiyus of Kedusha ultimately is exiled, meaning it's repressed, it's stifled, because if it wouldn't be, the very identity of the reality would have to question itself. The only reason Klippa can survive, can thrive as Klippa is because the godliness is concealed, and therefore it creates room for a substitute reality that people build, and build and build. And sometimes you can build, a castle out of sand, and it's a very, very impressive castle. The only problem is when there's a storm, the castle is destroyed. So what that storm in life means could mean many things, but the point is that you create a substitute for the real self, and the reason you create a substitute for the real self is, and you could do it, is because the true source of the self and the energy of the self is concealed. As we explained at length, the concept of the husk, the shell, the shalach, as it's called in Yiddish, the klippa, and therefore it could thrive as an independent existence rather than tzvar shamayim l'chamish tachim. And yet, there was one issue, and that is, if the chiyus is completely swallowed up and absorbed, how does it manage to give vitality to it? So he says this is where number 11 comes in, or chapter 11 comes in, and that is that there's an oir of Kedusha, light of Kedusha, that remains makif. Makif means it remains completely above. And because it remains completely above, it's not integrated into the vessels of the recipient. So you have here, on one level, it receives its chayas from Kedusha, and the Kedusha is not swallowed up and absorbed in it on that level, because it remains makif. And as he said, what remains makif is makif milmaila. It remains makif ethereal, hovering over it from above. On the other hand, it doesn't dictate its behavior. It doesn't dictate the klippa's behavior because it remains somewhat aloof and detached, and it's not fully integrated with it, so it could continue to remain klippa. And that's why number 11 is the link between the chiyus of kedusha and the chiyus of klippa. So the 10 elements that go into klippa, that becomes completely absorbed in it, enclosed in it. That's the chayis that gives it content, that gives it design, that gives it consciousness, that gives it identity. But that identity is an identity of klippa, not of kedusha. That also comes from kedusha, but that becomes completely concealed. It goes into exile in the klippa. The link between klippa and kedusha is that number 11 in the Torah. It's levoina zaka, the frankincense, the pure frankincense herb, levoina zaka. That is the number 11, which is the link, the missing link, so to speak, between the world of kedusha, where godliness is expressive, and the world of klippa, where godliness is completely concealed. Through number 11, the klippa gets its chiyus from the kedusha in a way that can allow for its identity to exist, but it doesn't challenge its continuous existence as klippa, because it remains in a state of makif. Therefore, the head of Eisav, which is in the bosom of Yitzchak, that's the makif of Eisav. The makif of Eisav, the number 11, so to speak, of Eisav, that is where he connected to Yitzchak. He's part of Yitzchak. And he says he's nichlol in Yitzchak, he's absorbed in Yitzchak and Kedusha. And that's the Eisav that asks about Ma'asrin es HaMelech ves HaTevin. And then there's the Eisav as his own individual identity, not his makif, from which he is split. He doesn't feel his makif, because that's what makif is. Makif means you're not fully in touch with it, even though it has a tremendous influence over you, but you're not consciously in touch with it. And that's another Eisav, and that Eisav is detached from his makif, like all klipa, which is disconnected from its own makif, and that's why it's makif. That's what makif means. Makif means I'm not consciously aware of it.
Ma'asrin es HaMelech, it's different than we. And I always understood. Ma'asrin es HaMelech, according to this, is a real. It's a passionate desire to really do something really, really good.
Of course.
It's coming from a genuine place.
Of course, it's real. It's real.
That's not really what we're taught in school. We're talking that Eisav was tricking him by asking these questions. So you're being disingenuous by answering this young man that way.
Who's being disingenuous?
You are. Well, just like Eisav. I don't know. Maybe you're being real. Isn't that the way every third grade Rebbe teaches it? That.
Can't go 3 days late.
So now you want to discuss the school system? Is that
No,
what you want to discuss?
what is the truth? What is the truth? That's all. He's asking a question that he was confused because, just like everybody else sitting here, we were told that Eisav's coming as a con man, and he's saying, "Gee, Tati, how much do you have to give Meiser from salt?" And am I there? And he has a little yarmulke.
Right. But isn't that very problematic for a simple reason that for this we have to assume that Yitzchak was really in La La Land?
I guess that's what Rivka thought, right?
In other words, we're teaching the children that the Avos were the greatest tzaddikim who ever lived. Is the underlying message really that tzaddikim could be fooled?
No, I mean, you have a love for a child, so you could see how it could be taken in. Your child comes and, it behaves like a tzaddik, and you want to so much passionately believe your child is a tzaddik, but like the gentleman said, his real motivation was, just to be on the in with Yitzhak. It wasn't really anything to do with knowing Torah. The guy was out there murdering and stealing, and
Okay, I hear you. Maybe we could put it this way. Eisav was deceiving himself more than he was deceiving his father. That's what it really means.
Got it. That makes sense.
And that's often what happens. We don't really deceive others ever. All deception of others, the one who gets deceived most is yourself. That's how it works. It looks like you're deceiving others, but okay, adaya de nisht. Right? There was a Rebbe known as the Maharash, the son of the Tzemach Tzedek. So he said once, Azoi, in Yiddish, he says, der Eibishter kann man nicht abnaden. God you can't deceive. The Welt kann man euch nicht abnaden. The world you also can't deceive. At least he meant his world. Man kann abnaden managed für sich allein. You can only deceive yourself. No, if was is the kunst as a nar nart up a nar. So what's the big deal when a fool deceives a fool? Somebody once came to him, the same person, and he said that his friend committed a terrible, terrible sin. And he's embarrassed to come to the Rebbe to speak about it. So he sent him to come to the Rebbe to speak about it and ask for a tikkun. This is what he tells the Rebbe Maharash. He invents the story. And he tells him what the sin is. So the Rebbe Maharash says, Ich verstehe nicht. Why did you have to come and tell me that your friend did it and he's embarrassed to come? Why couldn't your friend come and say that you did it and you're embarrassed to come? Al derech zeh, you understand? So the greatest deception here is, there's a word from the Kotzker Rebbe, Loi Signov starts with yourself. Don't steal from yourself, right? Don't delude yourself. And that's really the tragedy of Eisav. The tragedy of Eisav is that there's a complete split between his pnimi, meaning the way he appreciates his identity, and the way that he really operates on another level, which is also a genuine part of him. And it's so genuine that Yitzchak actually is extremely taken by it, because he sees it. And it's almost he sees himself in that child. And that's why Chazal say that the head of Eisav was buried with Yitzchak. In other words, at the end of the day, there's a part of Eisav that's completely integrated and united with Yitzchak, and for generations, for thousands of years, the head of Eisav remains in the bosom, in the grave, in the Maris HaMachpelah, not only in the same cave, but literally in the cave, in the space, in the region where Yitzchak's holy guf is buried. Now here we have to appreciate a little bit the contrast between Makif and Pnimi. Because what this really tells us is, what this really tells us is that Klippa has a number 11 which Kedusha doesn't have. Now Kedusha doesn't need it. Why? Because everything is integrated. So everything is integrated, so the light could be filtered and manifested in the vessel. That's what Pnimi means. Or Pnimi means whenever the light suits you, it becomes one with you. You have a grasp of it. It integrates in you. It's something you relate to. And therefore it defines you. And this is the key. Or Pnimi defines you because you feel connected to it. You understand what it is. It's you. It's how you define yourself. Or Makif may define you much more than Or Pnimi, but you're completely clueless. Or Makif is so powerful, it may define you much more than anything else. Today we speak a lot about the superconscious or the subconscious. It's really Makif. Makif means something that may impact you in the most drastic ways, but you will never be aware that that is the reason. So you could live your whole life in a particular way, and you don't know that it's all because of a particular event, story, consciousness, state of mind, perspective, that is ingrained. Or Makif doesn't mean it doesn't influence you. It means the influence is sometimes so powerful that it's not conscious. It can't be conscious because it's too powerful to be conscious. Sometimes it would shake up the system.
But Eisav did, so sometimes it does break. I mean, Eisav did choose sugar, right? No, had no effect.
Mamish, no.
A person could go through life like that.
Yes, you could. Yeah, that's what Makif is. And the Makif is very holy. The Makif is really holy. It's radically holy. Yeah, and it impacts you. And he says the whole Klippa operates that way by definition. It needs Kedusha. And the Kedusha can't be completely swallowed up because then it wouldn't be able to give it Chiyus. But the Chiyus that it gives it, the relationship is a very, very intense relationship, but a non-conscious relationship. Because the Klippa would be conscious of what it is. How could it be Klippa? It would have to shed all the layers. The reason it could maintain all the layers and continue living and operating as it's operating is because the Oyer of Kedusha, which is very real, its relationship with it is in a state of Makif, not in a state of Pnimi. Where Kedusha doesn't have that. Kedusha, there's only 10, there's no number 11. Yeah. Gemara in Brachas. Ganva apum machtarte rachamone karye. The Gemara says a ganev, when he's digging the hole to get into your basement, he starts davening. And he starts making hachlotas, 50% tzedakah, he's going to build a yeshiva, he's going to achrosas kala. You ever see that? He's ganvening right and left. People do it. But he's going to give to the dinner, yeah? Everything. And he davens to Hashem. Boy, please help me. The shaila is, why does he daven to Hashem? Because he believes in God. He doesn't pray to Hillary. He doesn't say, Hillary, please help me, or Queen Elizabeth, or Donald Trump, please save me. He turns to God. He believes that somehow God runs the world. But God said, Lo signoivu. Hashem said, don't lie. No hasagas gvul. So you believe in that. This is an example.
You thought that meant don't steal from yourself.
Very good. See, this is one example of makif where something has an influence on you, even in a conscious way, but it's not integrated. You don't really have a relationship with God to the point that it translates in dollars and cents. Ultimately, you got a ganve, right? As somebody once said, Kinderlach, as if it nicht ganvenem, it nicht haben. Kids, if you're not going to steal, you're not going to have. You know, business is business, pleasure is pleasure, not connected. I take a daven to God, help me out. But L'poil Maamar, somebody got to support the family. Who's going to support? God is going to support the family. I got to support the family. That's one example of makif in one way, where the person is aware of something, but not in an it's not real. It's not pnimiistic.
This really explains. I never understood.
Right. The Or Makif is the kedusha that fuels the atheism. Most Jewish atheists are very religious. In other words, they're religious about their atheism. You could see it. They're usually more religious about their atheism than religious Jews are about religion. They're more passionate about God not existing than a lot of people who officially believe that God exists are passionate about God existing. Right? I was once at a lecture and there was a big atheist there and he started to holler, "There's no God!" So I told him, why are you getting upset about something that doesn't exist? Relax. Who gets upset about things that don't exist? You don't get, didn't happen. The pshat, of course, is that it's in his kishkas. It's in his kishkas, and it may be in his kishkas more than another person. And that's why the upsetness is more powerful, because I have to repress it much more. You know, they say the anecdote that there was this Jewish secular Manhattan father who put his kids into a secular prep school in Manhattan, and it wasn't working, it didn't work. But he needed a good school. He wouldn't put him, God forbid, in a public school. So he puts him in a Christian prep school. So the boy comes home the first day, he says, "David, what do you learn?" He says, "Daddy, unbelievable. I learned about this Trinity, you know, the Ghost, the Holy Spirit, the this, the that, three gods." He tells him the base of Christianity. He picks his son up by his collar. He says, "David, I'm going to tell this to you once and only once. There's only one God and we don't believe in him." So, this all comes from Makif. The passion that fuels Klippa is really Kedusha. But there's no conscious relationship. So therefore, there is a very deep connection to something, but the connection is one, it's not superficial, it's deep. Makif is deeper than anything else. But it's so powerful and so intense, but you can't make the connection. You can't make the conscious connection between what is fueling it and what is not fueling it. Because if you do, you won't be able to be you. And it's too painful to question your whole identity. And this is true in people's lives, in a lot of different situations. We don't make connections, and that's why we can afford to perpetuate certain realities in a way, because the makif remains the makif, and the pnimi remains the pnimi. What this means is also something else, and even deeper. And that is that there's certain, and this is a very sensitive idea, and I'm saying it's a very sensitive idea, and like a lot of these ideas, if they're misconstrued, they can also feed erroneous behavior and erroneous ideas. I'm saying this, especially this idea that I'm going to say now, which emerges from here, that these are very sensitive ideas. And some of these sensitive ideas one has to be sensitive with, because they can be, misinterpreted. And when they're misinterpreted, they can produce the opposite notion which he's trying to teach. But whenever you're dealing with high-stake energy, you have to be careful, right? Which is why, just for clarity's sake, why there were always Jews who felt that all this material should not be studied by anybody. Because why confuse people? Why start talking about Eisav has a makif? Isn't it just better to say Eisav was a Rasha, Mirusha, Yaakov was a tzaddik, Yitzchak was fooled, boom, next. Clarity, borders, boundaries. Why the need to explore deeper dimensions of Eisav? Now, even if it's true, who needs truth? What we need is people to follow the route. Follow the route. Why confuse? Why go winding? Just make a straight path and tell me Eisav was wicked, Yaakov was good. People who agree with me are tzaddikim, people who disagree with me are rishayim. That's it, done. Settled. There's an advantage to that. There's an advantage to that. I don't think today Judaism will survive that way. I don't think it will survive that way in a real way for real people. I don't think. Which is the reason that the Baal Shem Tov came to the world, the Baal HaTanya came to the world, etc. But I'm bringing out that there's a svara, a different svara. Don't deal with nuclear power. let's what's the word? Remove all the nuclear.
Disarm?
I guess, what's the word? Let's remove that energy.
Non-proliferation.
Non-proliferation, right. Just let's go back to challah knives. You fight with challah knives, you don't fight with nuclear energy. The problem is there is nuclear energy in the world. So if Judaism is not going to operate on a level of nuclear energy, you lose the battle, because there is nuclear energy. People operate on this level of consciousness today. In the whole world, everyone is dealing with makif pnimi in their own way. So if Yiddishkeit doesn't tap into that level of energy and reveal God's perspective, so then people who are sophisticated and deep and are searching for a deeper truth, they say there's nothing in this religion for me. If all it could tell me is how to dress and how to look and how to fit in, and that's where it ends, and basically for doing this I'll burn, and for doing this I'll get cotton candy, and that's where its message begins, its message ends, and whenever I ask a question it's heresy, and it's apikursis, it's kvira. So maybe it works for some people, but as some of you know very well, internally there's a level of disassociation and disillusionment that's very powerful. But whenever you deal with these realities, there's always the sensitivity that needs to be introduced.
Jews have a different belief than non-Jews?
Well, every person has a soul, but the type of the nature of the Jewish soul is different. So here we come to one more very important point about makif, and that is that klipa has an energy that kedusha will never have. Which is why Yitzchak is so desperate to bring Eisav into the fold. Because Yaakov needs Eisav. And Yaakov still needs Eisav. And this Maamar has a continuation in Parshas Vayishlach, which I hope we'll get to, where Yaakov meets up with Eisav at the end of everything. At this point in Toldos, they split. There's no way there could be peace between them. That's the tragedy. Yitzchak tries, but there's no way. But remember, 20 years later, Yaakov is coming back, and he wants to meet Eisav. He wants to reconnect with Eisav. They tell him that Eisav wants to kill you, which ends up not being true, because Eisav actually hugs Yaakov, because Yaakov does all the things he does. So that's the next stage. But there's something in Eisav that Yaakov needs. In other words, you can't detach from Eisav, because Eisav has a gift that Kedusha doesn't have. What is it? It's called the makif, the makif. On one hand, the makif is only there because of the disadvantage of Klippa, because Kedusha is integrated, Klippa is not. But because of that, because in Gemara there's an expression, Kal kalasenu zui takanasenu. Every crisis is also an opportunity. Every flaw is also a virtue. Every door that closes opens a new door. And every challenge always creates newness. There's no pain that doesn't create new paths in life. So the challenge of Eisav, the challenge of Klippa, and what it has also introduces something that's very powerful that Kedusha doesn't have. And that's one of the reasons God even wanted it should be Klippa, so that ultimately it should contribute what it could contribute. And that has to do with the makif, which Kedusha doesn't have. You see, the tragedy of Klippa is that it's disconnected from the Makif. But to understand something about Makif, Makif has a radical component to it that Pnimi doesn't have. Because our Pnimi seeks integration. It seeks unison. It seeks to be settled. It wants to settle. That's what it is. It becomes part of who you are. Makif, which doesn't have to become part of who you are, can afford to be wild, to be bohemian, to be uninhibited, to be free. Reb Nachman of Breslov writes in one of his Svarim, Likutei Maran, I think I saw once, that art was not a gift that was given to the Jewish people. That's what he says. Art was not a gift that was given. It was given to Eisav. Now, what does he mean? What does he mean? I could speculate what he means. You have some great Jewish artists. What he means is, I don't think somebody who's making a painting or even a musician, there's plenty of Jewish artists and profound Jewish artists. He means art as the uninhibited expression of creativity without limitations. What we call in America the bohemian lifestyle. There's something in Klippa that is wild that Kedusha will not have. And the reason Kedusha won't have it is because Kedusha always demands integration and therefore demands discipline. It demands structure. You can't get carried away to a point where all limitations are nullified. Because there's always somebody who's going to tell you Zman Krishma is in 20 minutes. You know, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Plag. Judaism is very, very structured. Torah is extremely structured. You have Shabbos, you have Yom Tov, you have sunrise, you have sunset. Sunrise creates a chalois of halacha, and sunset creates a chalois of halacha. Netzachama creates a whole set of halachas. Kasher l'shofar, kasher l'milah, kasher l'tfilin, kasher l'tzitzis, pidyon haben, whatever you have to do by Yom. Nighttime creates a whole new chalois of halachas. Whatever you can do at night, whatever it is. Ba Hashemesh v'toyer, Sfiras ha'omer, Seder Leil Pesach, Dinei Shabbos and Yom Tov night. There's always a synchronization between the self and the world, between time and space, and there's obligations that are created by structure. This is always Ur Pnimi. The Ur has its place in the Keli. Klippa is connected to a Makif. Makif, by definition, doesn't need to settle. It doesn't have to be integrated. You don't even have to know what it is. It doesn't have to become part of you. So it tolerates a certain chaos, a certain radicalism, a certain uninhibitedness that is the essence of what art is. The creativity of art is that it has absolutely no limitations whatsoever. Now, because of that, a person can also destroy themselves. A person could take that into very dangerous places. That is what infinity is. Infinity means that there's absolutely no limitations. And that was the difference between Eisav's life and Yaakov's life. Yaakov was Ishtam Yoshev Eholim. Literally, he sat in the tent. The tent defined him. Eisav was a man who knew how to hunt. Ish Sada. In the field, you have nothing to define you. There's no walls. A Oyel has a cover and a walls. The field represents an open place. Psychologically, what it means is, in the world of Makif, everything is open. When everything is open, you can experiment with things without any limitation. There's something very, what's the word? There's something very, okay, I don't know, empowering, but there's something very vibrant about it, very vibrant. There's a lot of vibrancy, and the vibrancy comes because of absolute wildness, uninhibition in the profoundest way. Why? Because the chiyus of God that fuels Klippa is uninhibited. It's makif. It has to be makif, because if it was consciously filtered, you couldn't be Klippa. It's not. And therefore, there's a wild component of absolute free art, if you will, that has no hagbalas, no limitations in that universe. The challenge, of course, is that very often, we all know what that is. Can you live a free life? What does a bohemian life look like? You know, what does a what does a bohemian life? Anybody here is a bohemian or a wannabe bohemian? Wannabes only?
I know artists, yes.
You know, like real artists, right? Real artists, real poets, sing musicians have this. It's a certain. There's a lot of. It sometimes allows for tremendous creativity. And it would seem that religion is the greatest enemy to that. because it demands obedience, discipline, structure. And here's the question, can Judaism be bohemian? Because there's a part of the soul that wants to be bohemian. There's a part of the soul that needs to scream and fly and dance and soar without inhibition. It's like a spunk, a chius, a vibrancy that's infinite. And one of the great tragedies is when we take people who soar and we stifle them and we force them into a box, and their only way of becoming liberated is by breaking out of the box and destroying even the good things that exist in the box, because there's no way to link the bohemian aspect of the soul with the need for structure. Everybody understands to maintain a married life with a family, you can't be out every single night dancing to the end. Dance me to the end of life, is that the expression? Dance me to the end of life, to the end of the horizons, to the end of the planet, right? You want to raise a family, it's all structure. Anything you want to do, you want to run a business. Without structure, ultimately, all ideals fade away into oblivion. Chaos and the bohemian lifestyle are short-lived by definition. There's a reason that great musicians and great artists have downers that are unprecedented and usually need various substances to maintain their high, because it's very, very difficult, because by definition, you're out in open space, there's no gravity. There's no gravity, you're in open space. It's very refreshing when you do it for a few months, or maybe for a few years. But ultimately, there's nothing you can call your own. That's the tragedy of Makif. The tragedy of Pnimi is that it sometimes robs people from that endless expression. So in Yitzchak's world, he sees Yaakov and Eisav as a perfect match. If only Yaakov could learn how to take from Eisav his Makif, and Eisav could learn how to integrate the Makif into Pnimi without destroying either one of them, you have here a very profound relationship. Because the Makif does have something that by definition is very, very unique. And Kedusha, on its own, so to speak, doesn't have it. Now, of course, Makif is Kedusha. When I mean Kedusha, I don't mean Kedusha doesn't have it. I mean Kedusha that is completely Kedusha lacks it, because it doesn't need it. The Klippa gets the Makif from Kedusha. The Makif is also Kedusha. I just want to clarify that. The box here, I don't mean by the box here like we say he's in the box. I'm talking here a much larger box. I don't mean the box
what
like...
was Yaakov Tiferes, had a perfect balance, and he did have that part in him?
Yaakov was Tiferes, which is a perfect balance, but a perfect balance is not Makif, a perfect balance is Pnimi. Perfect balance is integrated. Makif is wild. It's extremely wild.
What would have been better with Yaakov when he would have had a Makif?
Well, he had to get it. We'll soon see. Yaakov had to get it. That's why Yaakov... There's a relationship between Yaakov and Eisav that cannot be separated. You can't just make believe Eisav doesn't exist. Now Yitzchak, therefore, saw Eisav, and he saw two sides of Eisav, and they were both very real. There was one element of Eisav that says, Ketzad ma'asrin hamelech v'esat heaven. There's really a very deep idealism there. He's searching for truth, and that's an element of Kedusha, but it's completely not integrated. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know that he's really looking for God. He's really looking for truth. He's really looking to connect to truth. He's really looking to connect. He will never identify himself as that, because that would have to cause him to change his entire life, his entire identity, his entire perception. So there's an element of Eisav where he says God doesn't exist, and there's another element of Eisav where he doesn't stop screaming that he wants a relationship with God. It's very, very deep. When my father passed away, my father had a newspaper, a Yiddish newspaper, the Allgemeine Journal. So in my house, I knew a lot of Yiddishisten. The Yiddishisten were classical atheists, a lot of them. Bundists, leftists, social work, socialists, from Russia, a lot of them. The Yiddishisten, most of them had a good Jewish education. They had something with religion that was extraordinarily deep. So one of the directors over there, the Farvitz, was created by them. The Farvitz, today it's the Forward, but there was a daily Yiddish newspaper, the Farvitz. It had a lot of power. Had a 250,000 readers in the early, after the war. All the immigrants, they couldn't read English. They read the Yiddish press. So They had 600 schools in America and Canada and South America. The Yiddishisten had 600 schools called Arbeitering, Workman's Circle. 600 Jewish schools, imagine. Completely secular, but Yiddish. Culture, no religion. So I was once speaking to one of the big chevra there. So he tells me that I asked him to write an article, and I said, in the Algemein, I wanted to publish it. I said, title it, The Ani Mamen von an Apikoides. Because he was very passionate about the Jewish people. I said, tell me I want to know, let people know what you believe. So he says, Ich bin an Apikoides, but I do have to admit that when I went to the Kaisel Amaravi the first time, I broke down, sobbing like a baby, and I couldn't control myself. And I still don't know why. There's no holiness because God doesn't exist. So it's just a place that Jews deluded themselves that God is there, and they built a temple and they made sex. It's actually a crazy, stupid place. So why am I crying? Okay, it's a place that my grandparents were, so it's a place of history, but why was I crying? He says, I have no answer for that. So you'll say, maybe you were crying because you have a neshama. Let's not go there. So he told me once that they used to make, the Farvitz Association, they used to make a ball, a banquet, once a year for all the workers. When? Yom Kippur. A banquet on Yom Kippur. So I told him, I said, why didn't you make the banquet on Sukkot? Why didn't you make the banquet Erev Yom Kippur? Erev Yom Kippur is the chamitzvah to eat, chas v'shalom, to make a banquet then. Chanukah, it's a mitzvah to have sudas. Yeah. Yom Kippur, why not Chav Zayin Tevis? Why not Chav Tes Cheshvan? Because they need Yom Kippur. A Jew needs Yom Kippur. Eisav needed to give Maaseh. A Jew needs Yom Kippur. But I'm not ready to say, I need Yom Kippur because I want a relationship with my soul. I'm not ready for that. But I still need Yom Kippur. So how do you do Yom Kippur? You make a huge banquet on Yom Kippur to say, Yom Kippur doesn't mean what everybody else says Yom Kippur. So I defy Yom Kippur, and that's how they have Yom Kippur. That's how they celebrate Yom Kippur. They celebrate Yom Kippur through a negative relationship, but it's a relationship. I need Yom Kippur. If they would know what it is, of course they couldn't eat on Yom Kippur. God says not to eat on Yom Kippur. But that's what Makif affords you. It affords you a relationship with holiness that's very deep and sometimes more radical than the Kedusha relationship. Because it's not limited by anything. It's not limited by consciousness. So it's completely wild. And yet, it can feed the opposite of what it is. So who is Eisav deceiving? Rabbi Yid. Who is Eisav deceiving?
He said it's himself.
Himself, more than anybody else. Yitzchak can identify that in Eisav, and he will not completely disregard him. I'll finish with a Maisa. I mean, I guess the whole thing is one big Maisa. But this Maisa I heard from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. You know Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael. It's a very deep story. He lives in the German colony in Yerushalayim, Moshava Germanit. He walks every Shabbos morning to the old city to daven in the Tzemach Tzedek Shul in the Rova, in the old city of Yerushalayim, the Tzemach Tzedek Shul over there that they liberated by the 6-day war. Yeah, he goes there every Shabbos morning. I don't know what it is, a 45-minute walk, a 50-minute walk, maybe a little more. I don't know if he still goes today, but I heard this a few years ago. So he was once walking Shabbos morning, and he met somebody that he knew, a neighbor or somebody he knew, who was a very liberal, left-wing Israeli artist. And left-wing Israelis are not like American left-wingers. Israelis know how to be left-wing. Americans don't know how to be left-wing. Jews know how to be left-wing. He meets him. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Efa halach kvod hara. Where are you going? I'm going to Shul. Where are you going? He says there's one place in Yerushalayim you could still buy bacon and eggs. So the covered Shabbos, he has chazer to celebrate Shabbos. He says, wow, where are you going for lunch? He says, lunch is a place you could still find lobster and shrimp. So the Shabbos, he goes there for Shabbos. He says, and what's for Shalosh Shudas? So Shalosh Shudas is one place there's real Yayin Nesach. So he goes there to celebrate Shalosh Shudas. Yeah. Adin Steinzel is a very clever man. He looks at him and he says, Ani mekanebecha. I'm jealous of you. He says, of course you're jealous of me. You're going to shul, I'm going to have a good time. He says, that's not why I'm jealous. He says, why are you jealous of me? He says, I'm jealous of how passionate you are about Shabbos. He says, unfortunately, I'm not. I go to shul, I come from shul, it's the same thing. Been there, done it. Another Shabbos bites the dust. He says, for you, Shabbos is meaningful. It stirs deep emotion. Why don't you just stay home and watch television? Why don't you just read a novel at home? No, you can't. You have to eat bacon, shrimp, yayin esach. If they mechala Shabbos and eat treifas, why? It means something to you. So Yiteh says, Shabbat. You also observe Shabbos. I think you observe Shabbos even more than me. You just observe it in a non-conventional way. But you also observe Shabbos. He says, that I'm jealous of. The Yid became a Shomer Shabbos. The Yid became a Shomer Shabbos as a result. Because he opened him up to a reality. You always wanted to keep Shabbos. But you couldn't say that, you couldn't acknowledge it. This is the Makif. The Makif is always Kedusha. But it's never translated as Kedusha, it's translated as shrimp. So you have your interesting paradox. You could see somebody eating shrimp, and it's really their way of trying to connect to God. Now, that's why I say it's a very sensitive idea. This doesn't mean that to connect to God you should eat shrimp. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that to connect to God you should eat bacon. To connect to God you should not eat bacon, you should not eat shrimp. I think everybody knows that, right? You're not getting that wrong message. Okay. It does mean that on a deeper, super conscious level, that's what he's looking for. But he doesn't know how to integrate, he doesn't know how to translate it. So it's going in the opposite direction. The outlet is exact opposite of what Hashem wants. But the energy behind it is very holy energy. And that's one of the most important distinctions probably in our generation. What people do and the energy behind what they do is completely not the same thing. What they do may be actually very unholy. The energy behind it may be much holier than the holiness of the people who hate them. It may be much holier. And because it's much holier, it's very, very powerful. And therefore it fuels much more of the unhealthy outlet because it needs more power, it needs more expression. It's nuclear energy. And that nuclear energy is extremely powerful. If one can integrate that nuclear energy, so then you change the world. Okay, we're holding page 40, right? The second paragraph.
No, page 40, you fixed with Eisav yesterday.
Vayhi Eisav ben Arboyim Shana. Page 40, Vayhi Eisav ben Arboyim Shana. Yitzchak was 40 and Eisav was 40, right? So this Maamar is also on page 40. A Yid came to the Beis Yisrael, Schusa Yogan Aleinu, the Ger Rebbe, and he said he's becoming 60 this week. So he said, Mazel Tov. He said, I'm very worried. He said, why are you worried? He said, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Ben Shishim Lezikna. When you're 60, you get old. So I'm very worried. The Beis Yisrael says, you don't have to worry. Punkti by dir is nish mekuyim geworden ben arboim lebina, but by dir nish mekuyim ben shishim lezikna. The Mishnah says when you're 40 you acquire wisdom. By you that wasn't fulfilled. So the other part of the Mishnah, when you're 60 you get old, also won't be fulfilled. So you're good. He's saying page 40 is Ben Arboim Lebina because Yitzchak married at 40 and Rashi says Eisav married at 40 because he wanted to mimic his father Yitzchak. So usually we see it as hypocrisy. That Eisav was just trying to copy and like a that Rashi brings like a chaza stretches out his hooves and says, "Cook, ich bin a kosher behei. I'm a kosher animal." In Yiddish, there's an expression, "kosher via chazerfissel." It's as kosher as the foot of a pig, because they stretch out their feet to show. Rashi brings to play their claws. That's on one level. That's the pnimi of Eisav. And the makif of Eisav, he was dying to be like his father. He was really dying to be like his father, but he couldn't make conscious peace with that desire, because if he would, he wouldn't be Eisav anymore. So the greatest tragedy of Klippa is that it sometimes destroys others, but in that process it destroys itself, because it doesn't realize what it's really looking for. And that's always one of the greatest sources of sadness in people's lives, that in their process of searching for themselves or trying to find fulfillment, they destroy themselves, because they never realize what they were really looking for. As the expression, sometimes people destroy what they love most.
So what Bechira did Eisav really have if he was destined from inside the womb to be Eisav?
Oh, that was my shir to the women this week. What type of Bechira did Eisav have if he was destined in the womb? So that's what I did a shir this week to the women. And you could see it on the yeshiva.net. It's called the innocent. It's called the innocent.
I don't go to women's shira.
No, it's not a woman. Women happen to be at the shir. But it's called the innocent Eisav, how we destroy many a child. Okay, I would love to share it, but it's Maamar a whole sugya b'fnei atzma. So, but it's very, very important idea that the way Eisav gets bad rap, a lot of bad rap. Some of it he deserves, and some of it requires a little bit of a deeper perspective.
Yeah, Rabbi, Bechira in general is a question that we don't really touch on.
You know how to pounce and stuff, man. Yes, Bechira is one of the interesting issues. What are you referring to? Yeah. You mean it doesn't look like anybody has Bechira, basically.
Either we have Bechira or I don't know.
Yeah. No, Bechira is not a pashata thing, because when you study people's lives, it doesn't look like really. Ultimately, everybody has been set up and framed by somebody, right? Huh?
It's a little rough.
No, I mean, you look at people's lives. Did they really, really have, did they really, really, really have choice? I mean, yeah, you have a choice to make a coffee or tea, but do you really? Why does this person want caffeine? Do they have bechira about that? Because they're tired. Why are they tired? Do they have bechira about that? Okay, good. Noted. V'hinei noida. It's known ki achiyus be'esekis in the mesavusa. The life that the Ribono Shel Olam puts in to the 10 crowns of impurity. Hu mipnei ki chayil bola vayikienu. This is an expression from a pasuk in Iyov Perek Chaf. Chayil bola, he absorbed, he swallowed up. Chayil is great strength, great vitality, great strength, great valor. Vayikienu, and ultimately he spits it out. Another pasuk, a pasuk in Koheles Perek Ches. Ve'eis asher shalat ha'adam ba'adam l'ra'aloi. There's a time that man rules against man for his own detriment. The dictator doesn't only destroy others, it's ultimately l'ra'aloi. Both of these psukim are brought in Kislev Harizal to highlight the relationship between Kedusha and the opposite of Kedusha. Chayil Bala is Klipa. It absorbs a lot of vitality from God, but Vayikenu, ultimately it's going to vomit it. It's going to spit it out. Eis Asher Shalat Ha'adam Ba'adam is the Adam of Klipa rules over the Adam of Kedusha, L'Ralei, only to his own detriment. Why? Because ultimately our confrontation with Klipa is always to extract its sparks, always to see what is the message there. Klipa has a lot of dynamic vitality because of 2 reasons. First of all, its 10 qualities are filled with Kedusha that are absorbed. And besides, as we learned yesterday, there's the Makif, the number 11, chapter 11, which is its link to Kedusha. And because of both of these dynamics, they have tremendous amount of chiyus. When we are confronted with these husks, with these shells, the purpose is not to surrender to the husk, but to extract the Kedusha in it, and therefore to grow from the process. So whenever a person confronts concept realities in life that l'cha'ira are very not kedusha, for example, thoughts. Let's begin internally. Always easier to talk about, or harder to talk about. Depends. Thoughts, impulses are good ones, right? Crushes, inclinations. I'm not going to say addictions, but I'm talking about that. You could always put that on the list, always. But all types of inclinations or cravings, dispositions, yearnings, pinings. Some of them are kedusha, some of them are not. There is always a lot of cover-ups in them. They do not tell you what they really are. That is their power. As I said, if they tell you what they really are, they will be deflated. It's like deflating a balloon. The reason the balloon is not deflated is because nobody popped it. And the moment they tell you what they are, you're going to pop. It's going to be popped automatically. So it has a tremendous appeal, but the appeal is always external, always superficial, and therefore it will not really satisfy you, because ultimately it will rear its emptiness. Its emptiness will rear its ugly head, or I should say its empty head. So therefore, when a person does confront any of these things, inside or outside, the outside will be very appealing, the inside will be very unsatisfying, because you're not looking for what it really says it can give you, because it can't give you what it says it can really give you, because that is based on a denial of truth, and anything that's based on a denial of truth is going to plots, if not today, tomorrow, if not tomorrow, after tomorrow, and hopefully in that process you don't plots. So ultimately, the whole purpose of the kedusha in the klippa is vayikienu. It's going to get vomited out. Hakah, lahaki is like to vomit, to throw up, to spit out. Eis asher shala ta'adam ba'adam. Klippa dominates over kedusha l'chayra, but it's l'rala, it's to his detriment. You know why? Because the kedusha is going to take out the chiyus, and then the klippa dissolves. Because the whole reason klippa could exist is only because kedusha. The moment kedusha stops feeding klippa, it has no source of vitality. You take out the oxygen. So paradoxically, here is the great tragedy of life from the perspective of Torah Sanista, one of the great tragedies. People surrender their souls to klippa, when really klippa needs them to surrender their souls because they need their chiyus, because they need kedusha. You're looking to klippa to get that which klippa really is getting from you. You're looking to klippa to get that which really it needs you to get, but you don't know it. And the ramifications of that are very, very profound, especially in terms of psychology. You're looking to something or somebody to get that which they really need you to get. And therefore you could find it in yourself in a much deeper and in a much profounder fashion. And whenever you're using the klippa for that, that means that the person is completely unaware of who they really are and what their potential is. Because the only real toichen, the only real koyach that klippa has is from kedusha. Elamite manipulates it, it distorts it, it conceals it. But that's the only real vitality it has, because it is the only real vitality. It's the only source, there's only one source of vitality. There's no two separate sources of vitality. So therefore, ultimately, l'raloi, eisa sheshalat adam badam l'raloi, to the detriment of the klippa, because that confrontation may equal his demise. Like those insects that when they sting you, right, for their blood, for their vitality, ultimately that also destroys them. That is also ultimately their demise. So therefore, I should explain a little more. Which nakuda?
What is helping?
What does it mean that's what the klippa is trying to get from you?
Whenever there's a source of kedusha, the klippa always yearns to get chiyus from it. Like oxygen. Because it must have kedusha to live off it.
A parasite.
Like a parasite.
Like a bloodsucker?
Huh?
It's like a bloodsucker?
Like a bloodsucker, yeah. In Yiddish it's called a piafka. A leech, right? Mm-hmm. It sucks the blood. And it always searches for it. Which is why, by the way, the Gemara says in Sukkah, Kol hagadol mechavere, yitzra yoser gadol. Somebody who's greater, the Yetzirah is greater. Or you'll always see in the halachas of Tumah and Tara, and this is the yesod of all halachas of Tumah and Tara, which most people close down close themselves off to when they're 9 years old. The first time they hear in yeshiva a mission about Tumah and Tara, they just give up on it, and even when they're 30, 40, 60, they just close down. Karbonis and Tumah Tara. Those two subjects, when the Gemara starts talking about, every shir just closes down, right? There's one, the teacher's talking to himself, unless he also closes, shuts down. But really, there's a lot of rhythm. There's a lot of rhythm in these stuff. It's not like, I think it's taught in the wrong way, but there's a lot of, first of all, a lot of spiritual depth for sure, but there's a rhythm to it. There's like a method to it. There's a beat to Hilchas Tumah Tara. So one of the big yesodus is that anything that is more productive for human use is always more susceptible to Tumah. For example, take food stuff, right? If it's not edible for people, not makabel Tumah. If it's edible for people, it becomes something that's makabel Tumah. Like schach can't be something that's edible because it can't be something that's makabel Tumah. Take utensils. The more precious it is, the more used by people, the more valuable it is by people, the more it's makabel Tumah. The less makabel Tumah. It's not coincidental. Because the definition of Tumah is, it's a koyach of klipa that's looking to nurture itself from kedusha. So therefore, the higher the spiritual rung, the more susceptible to tumah, because the more spiritual potential. Wherever there's more spiritual potential, in the absence of that potential, tumah takes over. In the absence of potential, tumah takes over. For example, if I'm going to go dedicate my life to thievery, you don't rob schnorrers, you rob banks. Why? Because you go where the money is. Maybe some schnorrers are like banks. But generally you go to the bank. Why do you go to the bank? It's harder to get into the bank. But you want to go where the money is. So since they say the old joke that there was a group of Arabs that went to rob the Tel Aviv bank and they found a bunch of pledges. So, okay, so that's, sometimes Klippa makes a mistake. It looks at you and it looks promising, but you're not really promising. So therefore, the greater a person is, that's why people who are deeper have much more nisyonos. People who have more spiritual potential have much greater demons. Anybody in this room or anybody listening who has great spiritual potential knows that throughout their life they have had obstacles that are sometimes very irrational, that overwhelm them. It's not a mistake, it's haba hatalia. The tragedy is when people see it as a license to delegitimize themselves rather than a license to realize their greatness. That's the klal. The more money in the bank, the greater, more professional the robbers that are attracted to it. The bees come to honey. That's what they want. So the more kedusha, the klippa always hangs around there, like the bees hang around the sukkah for the honey. And now you have to make a choice. If you don't actualize your spiritual potential, in the absence of your control, they will take control of you. Wherever there is an absence of spiritual intensity in a place where there was tremendous spiritual potential, that's where tumah is. Classic example is misa, mace. The body of a person, not a behemoth, the body of a person, dafka a person, because who a person is, atzelim elikim, has such power, such spiritual vitality, and in the absence of it, because the neshama left, it's the greatest, nothing could be as tamei as a person. In halach, it's the only source that's called avi avois atum. A sheretz not, a nevela not, nida not, ziva not, even though that's also tumah is connected to people. But the tumah of a mace, where life went away, so in the absence of that tremendous vitality, you have the greatest tumah. There's no source of tumah like that. 7 days, paradum avi avois atum. Why? Because this is nurturing from a space that has incredible koyach of kedusha. So that's where always the klal. Incredible koyches of kedusha attract incredible koyches of tumah, incredible koyches of klippa. And klippa here is not just a mystical, superstitious idea, like when you're a kid, like this dibuk that comes in the middle of the night, and you have to put shomrim, the story with the klayaka, right? You have to guard the child and that. We're not talking about those klippas. I don't know about those klippas. We're talking about things that we relate to very well. The shells, the husks, all fears are klippas. Much insecurities are klippas. Temptations that derail you are all these klippas. And therefore, wherever there's tremendous potential, they will always come out in a very powerful way. Now, here's what happens. They eat you up, and they leave you dry. And then what happens? They throw you out because they don't need you anymore. And that's what happens when you surrender to Klippa. They give you, in the beginning, the greatest meal in the world because they need you. The moment they use you up, they sap you, they deplete you from your energy, it's like an orange peel that you already squeezed out all the juice. What do? You don't put it in a museum. You throw it into the garbage. And that's what happens to people after they surrender to Klippa. Klippa takes them, squeezes them for all their juices, which are holy juices. In that process, they make the person feel like $1 billion. Why? Because I need your juice. So come to me. That's what all temptation does. Come to me, I will give you the deepest gratification in the world. Follow me, give me your energy, let me have your soul. When you're done with them, they will throw you out. You know, it's called ultimate users. They use you. You know, you ever had such an experience? You were used and used and used and used and used, and when everything you know and you had was taken, now out. And you're treated worse than a dead cockroach. That's what the challenge, the tragedy of Kedusha with Klippa is. I surrender my soul to Klippa because they put you on a pedestal. They treat you royally as long as you're giving them the energy. The moment they took all your energy, which is oxygen for them, because you got the cash, you got the dough, you got the divine energy, now I don't need you anymore. I sucked you out. What's the word? I guess depleted you, drained you completely, and now there's only a shell. Now you're the shell. Now they move on to the next. They completely move on to the next. So it would be like a person who really is the source of the wealth of the Klippa, but this person is coming begging them to feed him, when really everything, a lot of what they have comes from him. So this, how do you feed?
Surrender your soul.
You surrender your soul. You give them your consciousness. No, you always have a divine energy. On some things you never give up. You're right. Some things will give up. What do you do to prevent it? Always awareness. Always awareness. Always awareness. You identify what belongs to you, what belongs to Klippa, and you identify what you give, what you don't give. Was? Dalet Ames Shalalacha, yeah, Ames. Huh? Barasi Eitzahara, Barasi Loi Torah Tavlan. The Gemara says in Kiddush.
Make gathers. So the way the situations before they occur, you have to make fences.
That too, yeah. Listen, this is a journey. Every person has their journey, and there's general things in which we're all common, and then there's specific elements.
Didn't you say that the Tumah has its own 11th?
Emes.
Why do they need us?
Okay. The answer, excellent question. The answer is because there's something in Kedusha that Tumah will never have, Klippa will never have. There's an intense energy of Elikus that Tumah doesn't have, because in Tumah, it's concealed in the 10 vessels, it's absorbed, and even the Makif, which is extremely powerful, and that's where it really gets its fuel, but ultimately it always craves for Kedusha, because in Kedusha there's an endless, infinite flow of Elikus. And that's why, even though they have, but their existence is only what is needed for them to exist. When they want to grow their existence, they want to enhance their existence, they want to enhance their bank account, they must have Kedusha in order to get more and more and more. And over there's always an endless flow. So even though they have their own, which allows them to exist, but nonetheless they always crave for more and more in order to be able to build muscle, in order to be able to become larger and greater. And for that they have to go to Kedusha. They can't go to themselves. By definition, they could never find truth within themselves. Because if they go too deep within themselves, they'll find that they have to give themselves up. So they always have to go somewhere else in order to find something. Which, by the way, is also the reason that Klippa could never really give. It always takes. Because it has an insecurity that's very deep. And the reason its insecurity is so deep is because whenever you don't really think you exist, you can't really give. Because when you give, you're afraid that you're going to be giving the last thing that you could call your own, and now you're going to die. In order for people to give, they have to feel very deep down that their existence is solid. And therefore, when you give, you're not forfeiting your whole identity. If you feel that by giving, you're sacrificing your very essence. So either you define yourself as a martyr, as a suicide, I don't want to say that, as somebody who's a martyr, and that becomes your new definition, which some people do, right? As I once heard a mother tell her children, the only reason I stayed married to a father like yours is because of you. So you understand how that made them feel? And that's one option. Or another option is you say, I just can't give. It's just impossible because it's too difficult. So Klippa, by its core, has an insecurity. Because of its insecurity, it always has to be parasitic. It always has to be a makabel. Kedusha could be a mashpia because it has an inner core that's unshakable, an inner confidence. It's fine. It's not going to go away. Because its existence is not based on a cover-up. Whenever existence is based on a cover-up, you always have to protect it like this. You can't be open. That's why Kedusha equals vulnerability. And Kalipa always equals defense mechanisms, always. Because vulnerability is the art to be able to know that even when everything is open, you still exist fine. Why are people not vulnerable? Why is it so hard for people to have a very, very honest conversation? The answer is, what are you going to think of me? You know, I have a certain standing in the community, among my neighbors, among my friends. Why is it that at a Kiddush, take a regular Kiddush, when people are around them, imagine everybody would speak about their deepest insecurities. What would it look like? It would actually be a much more interesting Kiddush than talking about how boring the rabbi's sermon was. I'm not talking about 20 or 18 for shame. But, right? But who wants to do that? So we call it social gatherings. Social gatherings is another name for people coming together, not really caring about the nature of the conversation. Just doing it so they can each tell themselves that they weren't interested in being here, but they have to be here, because if they're not here, what is this one going to think or that one going to think? Okay, so I'm not trying to be pessimistic about all social gatherings. Some people are social butterflies. But the point is, why can't people be vulnerable? They may be. It's very hard. The reason is always because, what are they going to think of me? What is it going to look like? Now, although most intelligent people know that everybody's dealing with a lot of stuff. V'haraya, when you speak to people privately, right, if they trust you, you hear what's going on. The only people I personally know that are perfect are the people I don't know. The only marriages I know that are perfect are the marriages I don't know. All other marriages.
Should a person be vulnerable in a public gathering? Is it
I'm not telling anybody what to do. Listen, the world is based on a lot of shells and a lot of husks, right?
It has to be that way.
I don't know if it
It has to be that way.
there's a certain limited element. Yeah, I don't think a person should sit down with strangers and necessarily say everything about their life. But a person should at least have one setting where they could do that. Because if not, they don't even know, they can't even process it. But what is the fear of vulnerability? The fear is ultimately, if you think about it, I will stop existing. Either in your eyes or in my eyes. Kedusha doesn't have that fear. Why? Because your existence is not based on the fact that you or other people think you're perfect. Your existence is based on an essential relationship with God that can't be broken. So imperfections, challenges don't take that away. They don't destroy that. On the contrary, that's part of your journey. But if my existence is based on a cover-up, I can't tolerate that. I have to protect that. So Kedusha could give, Kedusha could be vulnerable. Klippa is always defensive, always. Of course, bigger Klippa is more defensive. Smaller Klippa is less defensive.
I'm thinking about Eliezer who went to find Yeshua.
Yeah.
And gave away all his cards. He didn't cover up almost nothing.
Who, Eliezer?
Yeah,
He even gave away the cards that he wasn't interested in the shidduch because he wanted Yitzchak for his daughter. Even those cards he gave away. You know that?
Yes.
Chidush Harim writes that he told Avram he wants his daughter. He wants Yitzchak for his daughter. So Avram said, "Arur ata ve'ein arur medabek bebaruch." Later, Lavan tells Eliezer, "Boy ata Baruch Hashem." Avram called him Arur, and Lavan calls him Baruch. So it says in Medrash Rabbah that Eliezer lost the title Arur, and he got the title Baruch. That's why Lavan calls him Baruch Hashem. The shaila is, how did that happen? How did that happen? He said, since Eliezer really didn't want the shidduch to happen, because he had a daughter and he wanted Yitzchak to marry his daughter, and nonetheless he transcended himself to do the mission of Avram Avinu. So in that process, he became not an independent reality, but he became an extension of Avram. So he says the title Arur applied to Eliezer. Once Eliezer was just an extension of Avraham, so there's no title Arur anymore. So it couldn't exist. And when did that happen? When he transcended his personal motive and he surrendered to Avraham's desire, so automatically the name Arur was taken away from him because there was no him anymore. His entire entity was an extension of Avraham. That's what bittul is. So Mela, that's why Lavan says Baruch Hashem. So even that he was vulnerable. Huh? Honest. Honest, yeah. So he says, "Well, mipnei anitzutzes shenaflu behem betchilas b'riyas ha'olam b'shviras hakelim vayimlach vayamas." In the beginning of B'riyas ha'olam, sparks came into all the klippos. This was the process known as the breaking of the vessels, where all the a lot of nitzutzes of kedusha, they became shelled, husked, which was part of the design of creation. Vayimlach vayamas. V'gamach maschet eitz hadas. Second stage was when Adam ate from the eitz hadas. K'may shekasu b'sefer HaGilgulah. Ulefichach nimshach lehem achayis bam shehu b'soid galus. Therefore, they have a lot of chayis of kedusha, but it's all in exile. Like we said, K'maymer Razal, this is a pshat in the Gemara, Lo Golu Yisrael Elekadei Lo Hoisif Aleim Geirim. The Gemara says the reason Jews went into exile is to add converts to the Jewish people. Very strange Gemara. How many Geirim did we already get throughout history? And the halacha says you're not allowed to persuade Goyim to become Geirim. Fakert. A non-Jew wants to become a Geir, you have to tell him, Zainish Meshuggah. Gemara in Yavamas, Yisrael Atvuyim, Schufim. What do you need to be a Jew? Merfelter Nishtois, the Chaluptzas. What are you looking for? Jalapeno herring. What do you need it for? Stay a non-Jew. You'll be a normal person. What do you need this insanity for? If he really insists, okay. But the vart is, what's pshat? The whole nekuda of Golus was for Geidim. Well, Tanya Taichus, Geidim represents a symbolic idea. A ger has an neshama of a Jew. That's why the Gemara always says, Kotten shen is gadol, ger shen is gayer. It should have said goy shen is gayer. The answer is, even before the conversion, there was already a convert there. So like Golu Yisrael, we went into Golu to Sheitois Falem Geidim. Wherever Jews go, they confront realities. Those realities have tremendous Geidim in them. And when you take out the spark, in other words, you grow from the experience because you find the Kedusha in those experiences, that's the Tachlis of Golus. So it's not just enough to say, get rid of the challenge. No, don't get rid of it. Look into it and find the spark. That's what he says. V'chein be'esav hayu nitzutzes. Eisav had tremendous sparks. K'moi, people, Reb Meir, Unkelos, Shmaya, Avtalion, Evadia. U'mehem hayatzayid b'fiv. That's pshat. That Yitzchak ate, what was trapped in Esav's mouth. When Yitzchak saw Eisav, he didn't just see Eisav superficially. He saw Esav's deep relationship to Kedusha. He saw all the sparks in Eisav. So throughout history, from Eisav came out some of the greatest Tanoim. Reb Meir was from Eisav. The Gemara says Reb Meir was a Ger Tzedek. You had Shmaya and Avtalion, the Zugas. You had Unkelos, Hager, came from Rome. He was a nephew of Titus. He gave us the Targum. And many more. Evadia Hager, in the Tanakh, you have Evadia. The Gemara says that Evadia, Sanhedrin, Evadia prophesies about Va'olu Moshiim B'Hartzion Lishbetas Hareisov. When it says Mineu Ve'ava L'Shada Benarga, Evadia was an Edomite. He came from Esau. And you always, the handle of the axe to fell the tree comes from the tree itself. So B'Meila, Mehem Hayatzayid B'Fiv, Hayaroitze Yitzchak Loitziyim Imenu B'Atzma Shaloy Odei Yaakov. Yitzchak wanted to get the sparks from Eisav, not through Yaakov, directly through Eisav. In other words, Eisav himself should be able to acknowledge the nitzutzis in him, both in terms of the 10 and in terms of the 11, the Makif.
What does it mean, Shaloy Odei Yaakov?
Kislev is an introduction that was going to say later that Rivka understood that the only way to get out the sparks from Eisav is by giving the brachas to Yaakov. It has to go through Yaakov. That's Rivka's position. Yitzchak's position is no. I'm going to salvage Eisav by himself. Eisav himself could be salvaged. Now also, after Rivka did what she did, you could get out the tzutzas from the klippa. Yaakov, when it comes through Yaakov, Yaakov is the one who. So Yaakov doesn't steal the brachas. Yaakov holds the brachas. Yaakov holds the brachas to be able to work on Eisav. That's ultimately what happens here. Rivka says, I want Eisav to be sublimated, but he can't be sublimated directly. You have to get all the blessings that really go to Eisav, because you are the one who's going to have to work through Eisav. Eisav himself is not in a position where he could work himself through. So therefore, now it has to come through Yaakov. Yaakov. Shehu b'chinas, he's going to use here Kabbalistic terms, Shehu b'chinas zah ze'er ampen, which represents the midos, shekol ha'oidus shalamayla nechlolin boy. Yaakov has all the lights of Kedusha in him. Yaakov comes down and he goes into what's called the world of Yitzira during the weekdays. He becomes what's called by Eliezer Avdei Skan Besi, which represents a lower level than a child, to go down into the klippus and sublimate throughout the weekdays. That's why in the weekdays you do boirer. Shabbos you're not allowed to do boirer. What's boirer? Boirer is selecting the klip, separating the klippa from the kedusha, literally the psoilus from the oichel. That's not for Shabbos. But yom and the chol, you have to do it. You have to be mevar.
Shabbos hello, hello.
Ach Yitzchak ratza sheyeh shaloya yideza. Yitzchak wanted it shouldn't go through Yaakov. Rak sheyeh his galus ha'oiris el yonim be'esav atzma. He wanted the highest lights should be revealed in Eisav. For this, Yitzchak said, I'm going to give Eisav not less light, much, much more light. How do I inspire Eisav? How do I let him find his Kedusha? For this, you can't give him less. You have to give him much, much, much more. You can't throw him out of your house. You have to keep him much closer to you because you believe in his light. If you don't believe he has light, you throw him out of the house. If you believe he has light, but it's concealed, you have to give him much more light than everybody else. More love. That's why you need to extract all those sparks. You need a much bigger flame. That's why, what are his brachas? Look at his brachas. What's Tala Shamayim? Not only physical dew of heaven. Who Tala the Atika, the Notif, Lizeir, Ampim China Shamayim. Kabbalistic terms, it's called the dew of what we call Atik, which is known also as Keser, which from it flows down to the heaven, which is called Zeir Ampin. In other words, much higher than Yaakov. From the dew, or Mishmaneyad, it's from the fat. Shemen, fat, oil is Chachma. Va'aba, Yosad, Brata, Nikra, it's an expression of Zoyar. The daughter comes from the father. Brata is daughter. The daughter comes from the father, that's Eretz. Mishmane Yaretz, Virotzo Laham Shechines Hatal Ba'Hashemin the Leila Shetezielos and Etzutz. Yaakov wants to give him the heavenly dew and the heavenly oil in order to sublimate his sparks. Shall take an example. You know, in the morning you wake up early. There's on the earth you have the tal, the dew. So he says, when the sun comes to shine in middle of the day, it gets hot. The tremendous, intense warmth and heat of the sun absorbs, it draws in all the moist of the earth. The yalam in haaretz, as the pasuk says in Bereshis. The vapor ascends from the earth. You have a huge torch, a huge bonfire, and then you put a bunch of little candles. The large fire will attract them, and ultimately they will be swallowed up. So Yitzchak thinks like this: by a tremendous glow of light beyond the regular light of Kedusha. So he'll be able to attract and bring out all the sparks that fell down very, very low. A small flame will never attract them. But a huge, huge, huge light and huge flame, they will not be able to remain apathetic to it. Their inner holiness will ultimately melt in this great flame. The sun will be able to absorb even that last moist, and even the tiniest flame, even though it's so dark, the large flame ultimately will attract it. It won't be able to be apathetic. But this light must be abundant. It has to be a blessing beyond the evolutionary process which Kedusha follows. If you would work with the regular evolutionary flow of Ruchnius, Eisav was not worthy of it, and Eisav would not even be able to absorb it. This is the diak of three strange words. When you read Parshas Toldos, if you read the text of how the story happens, and as I mentioned, without any other commentary, just read the text, you'll see in the words that this drama of Torah is actually the most accurate in the text itself. Yitzchak is planning a very intimate moment. Yitzchak is, the way the Torah describes it, very tender, very emotional. Vayikra Yitzchak la'Eisav b'noi hagadol, his oldest son. He says Beni, and he says Hineni, right? He identifies him as a son. He asks him what to do. He says, I want to bless you before I die. Now, when Rivka repeats it, she changes three words. Yitzchak told Eisav, I just want to bless you. When Rivka repeats it to Yaakov, she calls in her young son, and she says, your father wants to bless his oldest son. I heard him say, go get me food in order that I should bless you. But the way she quotes him is, your father said, Va'avarechecha lifnei Hashem. Yitzchak never said that to Eisav. I'm going to bless you before God. Why would Rivka invent these three words? He never said that to Eisav. He said, I'm going to bless you. Va'avarechecha lifnei Hashem. In this detail, Rivka was really saying the whole truth of the story. Lifnei Hashem, we touch in the presence of God. The Balatanya touches lifnei, literally, before. You're connected to Shem Havaya. Eisav is connected to higher than Shem Havaya, the Makif. Eisav is trying to bring out in Eisav his unique, Yitzchak is trying to bring out in Eisav his transcendental light, and for that he needs to go to his own transcendental light. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what we're really dealing here with. So Rivka is expressing to Eisav what is happening. When you read the story without anything else, you just read the text, you could see the tenderness of the story. The tenderness of Yitzchak with Eisav, the tenderness of Rivka with Yaakov, but also the tenderness in which Rivka understands what is supposed to happen here. We read the story, and as I told you, we manipulate the text very, very often. The text is a very, very pure text. It's a text that describes tremendous intimacy between father and son. We like saying Rivka just manipulated because he was a Rosh, she manipulated him. It's not manipulation. This was a very cosmic, there was a cosmic struggle here. It was really a question about the destiny of Eisav, the destiny of Yaakov, the destiny of the Jewish people, the destiny of the nations of the world. What's the Avarechecha lifnei Hashem? Lifnei Havaya dafka. Higher than Havaya. Haratzon shahaya liyitzchak lahamshich laEisav atzma shaloya de Yaakov umipnei shera Eisav milmayla lamatay de b'chinas levayna shubchinas hamakif. Yitzchak looked at Eisav milmayla lamata from a bird's eye view. He wasn't the principal or the teacher or the parent, the therapist who looked at Eisav from outside in, called milmata lamayla, from bottom up. He looked from milmayla lamata. You understand what's from milmayla lamata? From inside out. When you look at a person, you could look at the person from outside and then you try to figure out their inside. What if you could look at a person from the inside and then figure out their outside? That's a different type of perspective. Yitzchak saw Eisav milmayla lamata, from a gaze of above, from his highest space, his most inner space. And that's what he sees. So what does he see? He always sees the levoina, the link between Yitzchak and Eisav, where they really want. So now what happens is, he wants to articulate to Eisav what this makif looks like. Could you understand yourself? How? Only through a tremendous amount of light, which is a form of love, of closeness, of energy, can Eisav ultimately discover that even if he allows the sparks to emerge, and even if he allows his Kedusha to emerge, he will not die in the process. Klippa is afraid to die. If I remove my shells, what happens? There's nobody left. So what does the love tell me? The love tells me that the you is not really based on this type of you. So therefore, even if you shed these layers, you won't cease to exist. There's a form of existence. All rebellion, all estrangement, all alienation is a form of trying to exist. And without this, I don't know myself. So this is the only self I know as a result of my trauma, whatever I went through. So this is how I have to be in order to be able to say that I'm alive. I don't know my makif, but if I could reveal to this person their own makif, in other words, I can reveal their link to Kedusha and the intensity of it, which is why it got so distorted. So then Eisav could be sublimated. So for this, Yitzchak has to give him a blessing that comes lifnei Hashem, higher even than Yud Kei Vav Kei. There's no way you could touch the makif of Klippa if you don't reach into your own makif. Meaning, structure, again, very sensitive idea. People who don't live in structure will not be inspired by the structure that you give them because they defy structure. Only if your Judaism will transcend structure, in other words, you will reach your own makif, will you be able to reach into their makif and trigger it and arouse it. So, they're very practical. If a person is a good Jew, what we call an Erlich Yid, right? They wake up 5:30, they learn Gemara, they learn Halacha, they daven. I skipped the Torah, but they're very good Jews, and they always do the right thing. They always do the right thing, and it's very appealing to them. It works. Why does it work? Whatever. Good reasons. It works for their personality type. It works because they want to do God's will. They're fine people. They're Erlich Yidin. They're what you call good religious Jews. Yireim u'shleimim ledvar Hashem. Now they have a child who threw everything away, or a grandchild, or a friend's child, whatever it is, or whoever it is, or their own inner child, who threw everything away. They ran away to the other extreme. They defy the structure. If I come to them with structure, I can't get them. The structure of Yiddishkeit will not appeal to them because in the world of Klippa, there's makif. So the question is, how do I touch them? I have to find infinity in Kedusha. I have to be able to go out. I have to be able to touch God, to touch Kedusha in a way that transcends my structure. Because they're operating on a level of infinity, wild infinity. If I won't find the infinity in Judaism, I will never be able to touch their infinity. There's something in Klippa that, as I said, bohemian, it's wild, it's uninhibited. If Kedusha's appeal is only we create good structured lives, we marry you off when you're 17, right? And by the time you're 30, you already have grandkids or whatever it is. So if that, it's an appeal for a lot of people. I read in a magazine, they interviewed a woman from Satmar, and they asked her if she's jealous of feminists. So she said, what should I be jealous of? They say, look at these women. They go out 8 o'clock in the morning with an attaché case, and they go to court. They're judges. Are you not jealous? She says, why should I be jealous? She says, I'm 58, and I have like 69 grandchildren, and they all worship me. Why should I be jealous? So it was a good answer. So there's an element of structure that's very appealing to people, whatever that structure means. But when somebody is in a state where they completely defied structure, there's no way I could touch that soul if I don't reach into my God that is not structure. Structure will not catch bli gvul. Structure will not be able to catch the makif. So this means if I'm serving Hashem only because it fits my identity and it suits my schedule, it suits my schedule, it doesn't suit your schedule. So therefore it will not mean anything to you. Just because I like that my children should be B'nai Torah and should live a certain way doesn't mean anything to them. It means something to me. So they say, I'm not you, respect me, and I'm not you. The only way I could touch you is if I could reach a space of my own makif. If I'm just serving God because it works for me in my life, it doesn't work for you in your life. If I could find within myself a place of makif, in other words, that my relationship with Hashem transcends structure, for this I have to strip away my own layers and see if religion for me is just an escape in the sense that it's a safe zone of comfort because I like the structure, and ultimately that can't touch the other person. I have to completely, so to speak, jump into the water. I have to take off my levushim. And I have to reach a place that I'm not familiar with. And in that place that I'm not familiar with, that rawness, if I could touch the rawness of the energy, then I can touch your energy also. Because on the rawness level, there is going to be a very deep connection. So Yitzchak says, I can't give him stam brachas, but he can't tell this to Eisav. Eisav doesn't know this. Rivka understood this. So Rivka says it over to Yaakov. Rivka understands what you're doing here is, don't think this is a regular mission. What you're doing here is, you're really taking the brachas that belong to Eisav. You don't need this. You're a different mahalach. Because ultimately, Eisav is going to have to get them through you. Eisav is going to be sublimated through you. So now, Yaakov has to put on the garments of Eisav. He has to understand. That's going to be the next shtickle. There were two different perspectives. Yitzchak has a perspective and Rivka has a perspective. Both perspectives are very real. But ultimately it had to happen through Rivka's way. That's why it happened Rivka's way. Because Yitzchak's perspective remains a real perspective, but it had to happen through Rivka.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.